This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at Mubi.com/Karsten.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of What I Watched This Month, October edition. I'm in the middle of moving to Los Angeles, so let's get through this. I started this month with Howls Moving Castle. I can't show footage of this for reasons that have to do with why I've also temporarily privatized my Ghibli Ranked video. I'm probably overthinking it, but I don't want my channel to get permanently deleted, so here's some monkey footage. This was my third rewatch, and I think this is the most that this thing has ever worked on me. I'm always so taken aback by the whimsy of the first half. It's some of the most breathtaking animation I've seen out of the studio. It's just that second half I always struggle with. I was on board a bit more this time, but it still feels just a little too convoluted for my taste. Still love it though. And I watched A Different Man. I don't know how to describe A Different Man. It's easy to compare it to The Substance, but at the same time, unlike that film, this one actually does have a lot to say about self-hatred and beauty standards. It's not a full-on horror film, but it does get disturbing. It's not a comedy, but it can be really funny. It's such a unique movie that I'm still thinking about quite often. I guess the best way of describing it is like Dream Scenario with more to chew on. You watch a man's life get comically horrible, but instead of being just absurd, it ends up being really thought-provoking, as I'm sure most people watching the film would do the same thing in his position. It's a very clever movie that gets you to question your own outlook on life in a way that genuinely surprised me. I've been very vague about what the movie is about on purpose. You should go in blind. Then I rewatched The Fly, and oh my god, I think this is one of the best horror movies ever made. How did I not realize that the first time? I guess one thing I did not realize when I first watched it was just how sad it was. It can be silly, and the body horror is definitely overwhelming to watch, but the emotional core of it that comes out near the end is really quite devastating. In typical Cronenberg fashion, there's so much heart to what he's doing. These films are anything but empty. And The Fly might just be the most moved I've been by any of his work. Easily Jeff Goldblum's best performance. Then I watched A Matter of Life and Death. Talk about romantic. This is a Powell and Pressburger film I was lucky enough to catch on the big screen, and wow, not only is it one of the most romantic movies I've ever seen, but it's also just gorgeous to look at, which is no surprise coming from those lads. I mean, these sets are just out of this world. Literally, I could have looked at them all day. My one tiny and annoying complaint is I feel like Heaven should have been in color and the real world should have been in black and white, only because the sets in Heaven looked so beautiful, it felt like a crime to intentionally shoot them in black and white. Then I watched The Descent. I enjoyed this good and fine. It's a pretty by-the-books horror film from 2005, jump scares, shaky cam, all that jazz, but it's one of the earliest examples of these tropes and gets away with it by being genuinely unsettling. The use of light is masterful. I love how entire sections of this movie are in just one color, and how well executed the moments of darkness were. I have to admit, I didn't really care a whole lot about the characters. It felt like there was so much setup and interpersonal drama between them that got way too convoluted, way too fast. Not exactly the kind of thing that works for me in a movie like this, but still an undeniably fun time. Then I rewatched The Substance. As expected, as much as I love this, it was never going to be as good on a rewatch. Half the fun of this film is discovering what it has to offer. Once you know what's coming, even if it is still just as jarring, it really does leave you with less to chew on. But that said, I still had a really good time, and I'm still amazed at how fast it moves for being 2 hours and 20 minutes long. Jesus Christ. Then I watched Trog for Monkey Mondays. Man, I forgot I watched this, to be honest. I love Trog, the character. Even if this is really stretching the definition of monkey, he is very lovable and terrifying, perfect creature. Everything that isn't Trog, I'm sorry, Joan Crawford, painfully uninteresting. Like, my least favorite Monkey Monday trope is just people in rooms talking about nonsense. It feels like we're just filling time with nothing, and this is full of that. Still glad I made time for this, though. I can die happy knowing I gave Trog a chance. Then I watched One from the Heart. Shout out to Be Kind Rewind's amazing video on Coppola, which is how I found out about this little gem. If you didn't know, this is kind of Megalopolis before Megalopolis, but even if I didn't know about this film's history, I still probably would have been engrossed by it all. This is hands down one of the most vibrant and extravagant looking films of its time. Even if the script isn't all that, the sets are doing most of the talking here. It's a shame this was probably viewed as a cautionary tale for years, a lesson in why you shouldn't be allowed to indulge because you'll lose all your money, because this is what the movies were built for. A drop-dead gorgeous blend of lighting, dance, and music. It's one of the strongest cases for film being the greatest art form. If you respected Megalopolis but found it a bit much, this will probably be more your cup of tea. Then I watched Wolves. This exists on the complete opposite side of the spectrum of One from the Heart. what the hell is this? This movie isn't offensively bad. It's probably the best looking John Watts film I've seen, which is saying nothing. And obviously anything with Clooney and Pitt in a car together can't be an entire stinker, but it depressed me. It genuinely did. Is this really what we're doing now? Do they think we're babies, where all we really need to be entertained is two handsome actors who we used to love? Let's put money into something else, man. This is not what the industry needed. It just reads as desperate to me. Then I watched The Apprentice. I kind of expected to say the exact same thing about this, that we didn't need this, but the movie proved me wrong. In attempting to humanize two of the worst people to ever do it, the film says a lot about how a person comes to be that way. It's not the most comprehensive look at these figures, but it's refreshingly human for a political biopic led by two incredible performances. I did enjoy this. Then I watched Frankenstein. This has been on the watch list for, well, my whole life, really. Kind of embarrassing that it took me so long to see it. Despite knowing the story beat for beat, nothing could prepare me for just how good it was, how tragic and haunting the whole thing feels. Boris Karloff's performance is even better than I was expecting it to be. The production design is some of the best out of this era. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to watch Bride of Frankenstein next. Then I watched Peeping Tom. This is directed by just Powell, no Pressburger, and it is a lot darker than what I'm used to from them as a duo. It tells the story of a man who is making a documentary that consists of the reactions of his victims before he murders them. If you can't already tell, the film is the perfect lens through which Powell can explore his own relationship with making films, how mortal or immortal is something or someone if it's put to film. And the darker, more pessimistic tone of this was frankly jarring compared to A Matter of Life and Death, which was one of the fluffiest romantic films I'd ever seen. This is anything but fluffy. It's a film that really got in my head for these reasons. Weirdly could not stop thinking about The Fabelmans when watching this, how Spielberg is exploring a similar idea through the trauma of his upbringing. Now I'm just yapping. Then I watched The Blob. After being very disappointed by the original 1950s The Blob, this hit so nice. This is everything I want a movie about a killer blob to be. It has, honestly, the same kind of small town charm that Twin Peaks has. That is very high praise. There's a lot of camp, a lot of character to this town. These people are so funny and likable that it probably would have worked fine without the blob, but thank God there is a blob because the kills are just incredible. Some of the most creative and horrific kills I've seen in a horror movie like this. It leaves nothing on the cutting room floor and gives you everything you want. Loved this movie. Then I watched Inland Empire for Monkey Mondays. This is, as many of you know, the last David Lynch film I needed to see, and having finally seen it, man, he never gets old, does he? Such a great example of why he's such an incredible artist, even after having read his memoir, watching all his other films, watching a fair amount of his shorts, he still finds a way to disturb you and show you something completely original. The rabbit hole that this goes down is one for the ages. You need to watch this uninterrupted in a dark room and just let go. It makes for a truly spiritual experience. I don't know where this lands on that ranked list. It's so bizarre and beyond how I usually experience a movie that it's hard to compare, even for David Lynch, but it's that special quality that makes it, in my eyes, one of his most effective, nightmarish, and committed. This is what an artist in complete control looks like. I will say it's a true buzzer beater with the monkey appearance, but there is a monkey. That's what counts. Then I watched Cure for Monkey Mondays. That's right, Inland Empire was so insane I had to take a whole ass week off of watching movies, and boy was this a return. Having always been intimidated by this film, thinking it would be a very heady experience that I needed to prepare myself for, damn was this a relatively straightforward crime thriller. For about an hour. You guys know how much I love Fincher's Zodiac, and this is like if that movie was even more disturbing than it already was. For such a simple premise that I won't spoil, it's amazing how much this does with it, never feeling repetitive, adding more and more depth to the crimes. The editing here is so forward-thinking and ahead of its time. This does get very psychological and disorienting, but it does so in a pretty subtle way that doesn't completely throw you off track. You really feel in the head of the main character by the end, which is a pretty crazy place to be. I knew immediately that this was a masterpiece. I can't believe I slept on it for so long. Then I attended the Chicago International Film Festival where I watched The Seed of the Sacred Fig. This is a big one I missed at Cannes. If you don't know the context, this was made in secret in Iran, and at the time of this recording, both the filmmaker and some of the actors are living in exile in Europe. Pretty crazy pretty bad. The existence of the film alone is quite the feat. It makes everything you're watching feel just that much more powerful and urgent. The line between what is and isn't real is pretty blurry, and I was worried the film would rely too heavily on this aspect of it, but it doesn't. It's a riveting experience on its own. I won't get into the specifics, as going in blind is quite the ride, but the film takes place mostly in one apartment, and don't let that scare you away because it doesn't feel like that. I immediately felt so attached to every member of the family. It's so well written and performed that you really feel like you're in the room with them, making everything that follows just that much more intense. I just really enjoyed this thing. I was amazed at how entertaining it was. I was amazed at its existence. Do not miss it. Then I watched Universal Language. This is the latest from Matthew Rankin, the director of 20th Century, and like that film, this is visually overwhelming. There's a crazy amount of attention put towards the sets and leaning into the artifice of it all, which, if you know me, is my shit. But unlike a lot of films that dabble in artificiality, this thing is incredibly personal to the filmmaker, being essentially a love letter to Winnipeg, which I was incredibly charmed by. I didn't understand everything this threw at me, maybe I'm just not Canadian enough, but I did feel it pretty strongly. It's also very hilarious. Then I watched Blitz. Might be the biggest disappointment of the year, if I'm being real. I love Steve McQueen quite a bit, and this is the first time he's truly missed with me. Don't get me wrong, Blitz is watchable, but in the same way something like is watchable, it's shockingly stale and unmemorable. There are pockets of greatness in here, like most of the action sequences and the use of sound, which I found really claustrophobic and effective, but this is, at the end of the day, just a by-the-books war film that did close to nothing for me. I don't even know if I had a pulse while watching this. I barely thought about it since seeing it. I hope, Steve McQueen goes uphill from here. Then I watched Nickelboys. Guys, it's gonna be hard for anything to top this for the rest of the year. I was floored by Nickelboys. I knew going into it that it would be entirely from the POV of the two main characters. I did not know it would use that approach as beautifully as it did. I didn't know it would be one of the best edited films I've seen in years. I didn't know the story would affect me like that. Everything about this was so surprising and refreshing and moving. It was a complete masterpiece. This has some of the most creative uses of a camera that I've ever seen. The performances left me stunned by their authenticity, specifically one performance that's only in a single scene in a bar. It's a rich film that holds the same kind of weight some of Spike Lee's greatest hold, with the same sensuality of a Barry Jenkins film. But to compare this to anything would be a fool's errand. Ramel Ross is a fresh new voice, directing with the confidence of someone who's at the top of their game. I love this movie. It feels so good to watch something knowing that it's going to be studied in classes for years, that people will be talking about it for years. It's kind of an instant classic, if I'm being honest. Then I watched Rap World. This is Conor O'Malley's latest film, and I can't get over how much I liked it. It was actually painful to watch, knowing just how relatable it was. It's so embarrassing to even call this thing relatable, but it was. There are clips of me and my friends in middle school that are barely any different than what's in here. Just crazy. Which speaks to just how good O'Malley is at capturing a very specific time and a very specific person. I just thought this was hilarious and weirdly inspiring. More like this, please. And I watched The Brutalist. If you didn't know, this is the latest from Brady Corbett. It's a 3.5-hour epic about a World War II survivor who leaves Europe to chase the American dream. To write a cute little review for something this big in a silly what I watched this month video is a damn near impossible task. It's a massive film, both in length and in scope. With a budget of only $10 million, Corbett brings a man's ambitions to life. It doesn't stretch over a very long period of time, like something like Malcolm X, for example, but you still feel like you've watched an entire career somehow. You are not going to find me shutting up about the score for the next few months, so for now I'll just say it goes hard. Technically speaking, it's some of the sharpest filmmaking you'll see all year. Nothing looks better than this, I'll be honest. I forgot I was looking at Adrian Brody after a while. That's how good that performance was. It just has all the pieces of a great American epic. To see something like this coming out today, gives you a little bit of hope. What a special time to live in. Then I watched No Other Land. I don't know how you can't be completely heartbroken and horrified by everything going on between Israel and Palestine right now. If you somehow aren't horrified by it, this documentary will certainly send you over the edge. Reading about these atrocities, watching coverage on it, that's one thing. But to see it up close like this is genuinely devastating. I mean, what can you really say at this point, right? I even went into this thinking, well, I already know this is going to be heartbreaking. Do I really want to put myself through this? But the film proved me wrong several times. It's a lot more than that. It's a strong case for journalism and for perseverance. Just an incredibly necessary film that I think everyone should see. Then I watched Anora. Already made a video on this, but yeah, of course I loved this. I'm a Sean Baker guy. I like his movies a lot, and although this is more of a detour from his usual style than people are recognizing, I still think it's simultaneously the culmination of everything his career has been building towards. Definitely check it out. Then I watched Ephus. Ephus is a very low-key baseball hangout movie that feels like it came from another time in the best way. It's my favorite kind of movie in that it isn't focused as much on plot as it is capturing a time and place. Even if it feels like it comes from another time, it is very modern. There's something really quietly apocalyptic about this threat of the field being destroyed looming over the entire thing, the feeling that these little games are all we really have anymore. And for those reasons and more, even if it is low-key, it hits pretty hard by the end. Very refreshing movie. Just hit real nice on a Saturday afternoon. And hey, that's what I watched this month. Thanks for watching. What did you watch? Please let me know. Go watch all these films and form your own opinions. And if you're looking for something to watch next month, you should check out this week's sponsor, Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, and incredible cinema. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected by its team of curators. Discover the best of cinema at your fingertips, streaming anytime, anywhere. Right now, guys, we're in the thick of it. There's a lot of stuff to watch. It can be extremely overwhelming, and if you're ever feeling overwhelmed like I do every single night when I look for something to watch, Mubi has your back. Everything on there is there for a reason. It's something worth watching, and it's the perfect guide for when I'm trying to figure out what to watch on any given night. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at Mubi.com/Karsten. That's MUBI.com/Karsten for a whole month of amazing cinema for free.